Hey everybody, my name is Zoln and welcome to part 3 of Project Alpha. Today we're going over how to make a basic inventory system. And with that said, let's get right into it. So the first thing we want to think about is how do we want to deal with the inventory in general? Because we will have a player inventory. We will work on a list inventory, not a grid inventory. So this will make things a bit easier for prototyping. We can later on go into a bit more complex style of inventory, like a list inventory, something like that. But for right now, let's just deal with a list inventory. So with this list inventory, what can we actually offload to the client that the server doesn't have to deal with? Stuff like the name, like details, and images and colors can fully be offloaded to the client, while stuff like the identifier and custom settings need to be on the server. So with that in mind, let's get right into setting that up. So first, I want to head over to data, structs, and make a new inventory struct. In this inventory struct, I want to create a new blueprint struct, which is gonna be as item details. And how I'm going to set this up will be, we will have a identifier name. This is for item details, meaning you have a major item and it will, for example, have a array of item details. So we will need a identifier and we need a value. I'm going a bit more into depth what this actually does when I actually start using it. So what we're gonna do next, we want to create another struct, and this struct will be s underscore client item details, and we want to make another one which will be just for server details, so s server details. With these two in place, we want to first of all go into our client details. And what does the client need to know that the server doesn't need to know? So first of all, we can do the name. Well, we're gonna use a string. This is gonna be a item name. Let's capitalize this properly. Item name. And let me just recreate it. So item name, description. And then a texture 2D. Where is it? This is gonna be the preview icon. And what we could also add in here is, for example, have a secondary preview item for like having weapons. For example, if you have a weapon, you could make a, well, you don't need a second preview icon, but you could make a property like in enum where you can just say, oh, I want this to be full screen to have like a more of a background look to it, and instead of having like a small little icon. All right. And then what I also want in here, let me think about this. Let's actually make a linear color. This can be an option you can use. I'm going to use it for example, color coding properties. In the case of, for example, medical items will have like a little green line on the right, just so there's an easy way to identify what is what. The same thing could also be done if you make a property on the server instead of the client, meaning on the server you have a enum, for example, and you just forward this enum, which I think I'm gonna actually go with this because that will make a lot of things easier. All right, let's actually not make that. So let me save this and go into our enum, and let's make a new enum. So blueprint enum, and this is gonna be e underscore item category. I could make this a specific like string variable, but I think making it an enum in this case is a bit easier just to deal with it in general. All right, so this enum we're gonna populate with a few settings. So we can have firearm, tool, medical, and for example magazine, which is just a very weird concoction of categories, but it will work for now. We can later on decide if we want to switch out some properties or want to generally have new ones, but this is pretty much the basic list for properties. With this property list done, we can head back to our inventory and our server details. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add this property. So property. How did I call it? Item category. Whoops. Item category. Then what we want is a string on top of here, which is a item identifier. Item identifier. And this is gonna be the item category. And we just a second ago created something, which you can just look back, which is item details, which was just a string and a value. And what we're gonna do with this variable is we're gonna create a new variable in here. And this is gonna be our array. This is gonna be an array because we want to hold multiple of these if we, for example, have specific items that can carry more details than others. The reason why I'm doing it this way is if we, for example, have items which have to carry a lot of details, we don't have to make a long struct with a lot of like different details for ammo amount, for example, if we go into weapon modding, we don't have to make like make it a separate weapon struct, but we can just use the server item details struct and just provide this with, for example, what foregrip we're using, what barrel shroud you're using, what barrel in general we're using, what scopes we're using, what attachments in general we're using, what kind of upper we're using, what kind of I want to say bump stock, but that's not right, but what kind of what kind of stock we're using, and just generally stuff like that, what kind of grip and all that. We can just pump this into this identifier and value stuff. The same we can do with, for example, if we have medical items, we can say we have a max amount we can use it, and we have a min amount we can use it, and then we can deal with the rest from there. All right. So this is what we've done now, and this is gonna be item details, and we're gonna make this an array, which is gonna be item details. We're gonna save this, and now we should be able to see if we add an item, we have two properties in there. All right. What do we do now after we created them? We need to create data tables to hold base information. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a new data type folder, and which is gonna be data table. You can think of as a data table as like a sheet where you have it's generally data-driven programming. So we have in this case, we have a sheet with a lot of information we can then pull on runtime without having to, for example, beforehand get a lot of details and getting that running. Well, not creating details on the fly, but having them somewhere already stored where we can just easily pull them from. So let me make two data tables because we want one client and one server data table. So we're gonna as client item details and data table with a DT prefix. Oops. Let me just change this to this DT underscore. What would be a good name? This is the client data table, right? Client item details. Right, that was the client item details. Let me just create one. Where's the option? There we go. Yeah, this is the client item details. Let me remove that again. And then I want to make a new one, which is just gonna be another data table. And this is gonna be server details. So it's gonna be dt underscore server details. Now we have a client details where we can pull all the client data, and we have a server details and where we can pull all the server details. And the good thing about this one is we can just use like one for the use case we need it in. But the issue with it, it's more work to set it up, split up, because you need to do, on one hand, you need to do the identifier on the one, and you need to do the identifier on the second, which I'm going into in a second how to do that. So let's just make a few test items. In my case, we're gonna make 1, 2, 3, which is gonna be, so the row name will be our identifier. So this is test item 1, test item 2, and just test item 3. They all don't have a preview icon, but they have a name. In my case, I'm gonna name this item 1, item 2, and item 3. I'm not gonna do anything with the description yet. That will be in a later part when we go a bit more in depth with our inventory system. So now let me go into our data table server and make 3 more rows. Oh, that's 4. We just need 3. So the first one gonna be test item 1, test item 2, and this is gonna be test item 3. And I make sure I put the identifier also in here. So whenever we pull items for details from here, we already have the data in here, so we can pull more information. And all those items will just be medical, tool, and a firearm. All right, so if I take those side by side now, just like this, you can see we have test item 1, test item 2, test item 3, and the same down here, because we later need to pull them by this identifier from both. All right, let's get over into setting up the UI for this. So let's head into our UI folder, and in here we want to make an item row. So let's make a new folder for inventory, and in that inventory folder I want to make a new widget blueprint, and this is going to be item row. Oops, that was some wrong capitalism. Item row, there we go. Let's go in here, let's delete our canvas panel, and what we want to start out with is make a vertical box. Well, let's make a scale box first, a size box first. God, I always remember what the proper name for them is. And wrap this with a scale box. All right, and then we can just do a height, a width override and a height override. And let's, for example, say this is 300 and this is 50. Let's make this like 300 and 250. So we always have a specific aspect ratio. And let's actually take us down to like 100. So we always have this kind of aspect ratio when we have an item. Doesn't matter how big the screen or how small the screen is. And what I don't want to do next is I want to put an image in here, a scale box. Wait, let me take this calmly. A horizontal box. There we go. Now we have a horizontal box in here. Then I want a scale box and a item. Not an item, but a image. This image is gonna get in the scale box, and the scale box is gonna set to be filled. Don't worry, we will deal with the rest in a second. And this now is our item preview image. All right, Then we need a horizontal box and a vertical box, which we're gonna put also in here. Put this to fill, set this item to be fill by 0.25. So we have a small image on the left, and actually I want the aspect ratio to change a little bit. I want it not as high, I want it around 50 of the height, but I want it very wide. So we can have a very long item. All right, so in here, in this vertical box, I want to add a scale box. Actually, I want to add 2 scale boxes, set them to fill. And so now we have the main information, the secondary information. Now what I want to do with the main information, well, where the actual item name will be in, I want to actually add a new, I want to add actually in here another horizontal box. Why am I doing this? Because I want to have the option to be able to add some uses on the right. So let's add a text, and for example, right in here, wrap this with a scale box. Oops, that's the wrong item. It always happens. Wrap this with a scale box, and then set the fill on this one to 1, and set the fill on this one. Oops, I didn't put that in there. But I don't want this to be at 1, I want this to be at 0.1. Because this will probably just display 1 out of 2, something like that. Some very, very easy numbers, nothing major. And yeah. Then what I want also, what I forgot, is I want to add a border. This is for giving it a slight tint, the thing we set up with the categories. So I'm gonna put this at like 0.2. Then we can go, for example, green, blue, purple, or whatever we want. We're gonna set this up in a second. So let's set this to 0 and 0. There you go. So in here, we want to add a text. The same we want to do down here. And what we want is we want this to just be 0.75 in size, because we want that item name to be the main thing and the item description to be a secondary thing. So let me rename this item t_item description t_item name. Make those both variables. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to give it like kind of a grayish color here, and I want to give this a bit bolder color, not dark, something like this. So we can read this as a main important thing. Let me actually make this a bit brighter, something like this. So this is an important part, but this is just some description text. All right, and over here, this is something I don't think we really will worry about for now, but I'm gonna still set this. So custom event is how to go initialize item initialize item. That actually works. And what we want to use with initialize item is we want our struct data, inventory data, and we want client details, and we want server details. So what we want to do is we want to add 2 inputs, which is client details and server details. Server details, client details. And the first thing we want to do with server details is not this, but we want to drag it out and break it. Now we have an item identifier. What we want to do is we want to save this, because we will need it later when we actually add some interaction to this item, which I'm going to go over in a second because I forgot to actually add a button around this. So this is going to be our item identifier. And yeah, so we have our item identifier right here. And then what I want to do is I want to go in this border, add a button, and set this border to fill, and make this button have no color, because we just need the input events for this. And in this border, there's some padding, which we don't need. There you go. In this border button, it definitely has some more padding here and here. Does it have some more padding? Does the border have some more padding? Yes, it does. There we go. Now it's completely filled out. And in the button, what I'm gonna do is, this is item interaction button. All right. And what I want to do all the way on the bottom is I want a on clicked event. There we go. So one thing we also need is add a integer, which is identifier, because it's all good that we have this identifier, but the issue is if we have multiple of this item, we run into issues. So what we do is we have an identifier which pretty much just gives us the slot of the array. So what we want to do is this is promote to variable, and this is gonna be our slot ID. All right. So now we have our identifier and our slot ID. This is the two major things for actually doing later interactions with this. So now, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Come on, Visual Studio. There you go. Okay, there you go. What I want to do is, I got lost the train of thought. I want to first of all set up my item category. So I want to use a selector, and depending on this, I want to set the color of my border. Oops, I need to make this a variable, and this is gonna be item border. So with item border, I'm gonna drag it in and set brush. And this brush, we want to just split this, and gonna take the tint right in here, and then we can just split these values and then just choose a color right here. And important, our alpha needs to be at 0.2 for all of these. So what I'm gonna do first is set up the alpha for all of these and then set up the actual colors. So let me just set this to here and set this here. And this is gonna be like this color, this is gonna be this color, this is gonna be a bluish color, and this is gonna be a reddish color. All right. So now that we have those, we don't care about the item details because that's a server only information for now. We can later add our properties here with our uses, but we're gonna get that into that a bit later. All right. So what we do need now is we want our client details. So let me actually make some space and move this all the way over here. Move this a bit down and move this a bit down and just move this over here. Then what I want to do is I want to break this, and an item name, which we're just gonna set this to item name, set text, there we go. And we're gonna set this text just with item name. Align this a bit better. Then description, want to do the same, set text, and then we want to go right here, do this, and the last option is icon preview, And then we can just take this, and then we can just set brush. Is it brush, or can we just, yeah, set brush. So we can just do set brush, and we can just take this in here, break this, no, make this, make brush, and make slate brush. There we go. And what we're gonna use is just this image here, and we need nothing more. So now we would have a active texture we can use. And this is all just pulling from the data table we made. Well, it's not pulling from the data table, but the server information will not be pulled from the data table, but the client information will be, and we're gonna get into that in a second. So let me save this, and let's get actually into setting up a simple list inventory. So let's get out of our item row and minimize this, go into our UI folder and widget blueprint inventory. What we have here is a massive space we can use for inventories. And we're gonna make it very, very simple for now. And later on we will add backpacks and all that stuff. But for now, we do not care about this. We just want our system. We want to firstly have a first viable product, to then go ahead and later on add sub tasks to it and sub properties and just generally more information. So I'm gonna replace the spacer wrap with horizontal. Is horizontal? Yeah, it's horizontal. All right, now we have a horizontal box in here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add 2 scroll boxes, just like this, fill them, add a vertical box, and add a vertical box here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some text. This is not gonna be beautiful, but it's gonna work. So this is gonna be ground items. I'm gonna just name this ground items down here. And this is gonna be, oops, what did I do? I want to copy this right in here. This is gonna be inventory items. All right, I'm gonna rename this into inventory items. And we also have a second scroll box here. So ground items and inventory items. So what I want to do first is I want to only make this visible if so let me get a bool, and this bool is gonna be how should I call this? Is looking at ground items. So I'm gonna use this bool for just being able to check if we're looking at ground items, and we want to make a custom event. Oops, that's not a custom event. Oh god. Actually, let's make a function. Update current interact with inventory. And this function, what I'm gonna do with it is I'm gonna yeah, I'm gonna set this to true. And if we're looking at ground items, we also want a struct in here, which is gonna be a server details array. So what I'm gonna do is server details, and it's gonna be an array, which is inventory interacted inventory items. All right, so this is our interacted inventory items. That's the items we want to interact with. And stop interacting with inventory. And then we're gonna set is looking at ground items false. So this way we can easily update the inventory later, which we're gonna get into in a second. So what is the first thing we wanna do is we're gonna want to make those variables, which is over here is ground items. SB underscore ground items, which stands for scrollbox, and SB underscore inventory items. And the first thing we don't want to do is we're gonna get our, there we go, don't forget that. We're gonna get our ground items and we want to clear children. And with this, what we can do is now we can populate that. So if we have now our ground items here, what we can do is we can just loop through this, and with every loop we can first of all break the information, and then we can check right here. We want to get our item identifier, and then we want to get a blueprint node which is going to get data table row. What this does is it gives us a way to interact with the data table we just made. So the data table in our case is our data table client. And then we're gonna just drag and drop this into here. So what we do is we use this identifier to power this data table to get then the information that we have in this row. So what we do, we loop through every item that is in the box. We get the item identifier, which is this thing here. And this item identifier will help us to get our client item details. So we, for example, have an item. We create an item on begin play, which has some basic information in it also. And with this information, we just interact with it. And with the interaction, we loop through it and we pull the information we need for the data table. Also, one thing I want to do for now, because we're not using it, we're gonna make this, can I not hide this? Hidden, and we don't want this visible. All right. When it comes in, when we start using it, I'm gonna unhide it and actually use it. But for now, it's not important. So we have our item identifier and we're getting our data table. So what we then want to do is we want to create a widget. And the widget in question is item row. And with this item row, we want to, what was our event called? We created initialize item. So we want to call initialize item right here. And then we have an identifier, which we plug into this. And then we also have a server details. And what we can do now is we're gonna pull the client details. All right. And we're gonna do something very similar for the player's inventory. So we can pretty much copy and paste most of this. But one thing I forgot, because otherwise, if we would keep it like this, it wouldn't actually display for our user. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take SB ground items and add a child. We do not need to add this to viewport. We just need to add this as a child. There you go. So we can just run this and it will just work as long as we provide it with inventory details. All right. So, and what I want to also do on here is I want to probably also provide this with a bool, and this is gonna be called first interaction. Actually, I don't need this. If we then stop interacting with this, we can do so. But till then, we just do it this way. All right. Then what I want to do is I create a new function, update player inventory. All right. This function is gonna just take all of this instead of this, and we can just paste this in here. And I think I'm gonna do something a bit different. I'm gonna take this first of all and gonna name this something like player inventory. Hello, player inventory. All right, then we're gonna take our inventory items here and our inventory items over here. And now we would probably run into issues because this will update even if the player is not in the menu. So what we can do is we can drag this over here a bit and promote this to a variable, not a local one. And this is gonna be called, actually, I have a better idea. Let's not do this way. But when a player actually interacts with the inventory, we want to just call this once again. All right. So make things a bit easier. Actually, I want to change one thing. I don't want to use is looking at ground items anymore because this could cause issues. So let me just remove this. And we're gonna move, where is it actually getting used? Okay, we can actually get rid of this. But what we wanna do is we wanna go into our player. So in our blueprint character main, and is in inventory, and then we wanna add another one, is interacting with crate, with container, not crate, container. This should be set to replicated, and we're gonna set this up in a second how this will function. But for now, let's do one thing. Let's go to our begin play. All right. And then what we want to do is we want to provide the player with a few test items. This is definitely going to be a bit set up, but it's going to work. It's going to work for just displaying our basic inventory. And when we okay, then all right, yeah. So the player needs an array of server detail structure. So we want to just provide I have a better way of doing this. Let's make a custom event, and we're gonna call this initialize base inventory items. So, and in here, I want to make a local variable, which is gonna be a string array. This is just for debugging, so this is just for now, just to get a way to get it working. And this is gonna be called debug items. And with this debug items, what we wanna do is we wanna for each loop through this. And for each loop, we want to get data table row. And this time we want our server items, server details, just like this. And then we want to promote this to a variable, which is gonna be an array of server details. And this is gonna be player inventory. And then I just add this to an array. And because rep notify is a bit weird and it doesn't update on adding things to an array, on return here, I want to do inventory, and I want to just set it to itself. So the rep notify functions, and what I want to set this to, owner only. So when this rep notify function fires, it only updates the owner. So normally rep notify everybody that is here, but I only want this to rep notify to the owner, right? Actually, no. I have a better way of doing this. I'm not gonna make this rep notify. I'm gonna actually make a custom event in here, custom event ROC update player inventory. There you go. I can also write this properly, player inventory. There we go. And this is running only client. And in here, I'm gonna call ROC update player inventory, just like this. And when I call this, I want to take my replicate, this needs to be still replicated inventory, and get my player HUD ref. So I'm gonna take my player HUD ref, right? And then I can go really quickly into my HUD because it's been a while since I actually was in this project. Then I can get my ref player HUD, ref player HUD, and then I can not set up ref player HUD, get it, and then up player inventory. No, that's definitely not it. Oh yeah, it's a sub-widget of that. It's called widget blueprint inventory. So let me get that too. So let me go back, widget blueprint inventory, and then inventory update player inventory, just like this. So now we can just plug this in here and provide this data, not the data table, but the array we created in here with some values. So this one, and we can, I'm gonna add 6 items. And let's look into our data table, how we call them. So just like this, get this in here, test item 1, test item 2, and test item 3. So let's just double click on this and make sure it's the, I just copy this. And then I go in here, test item 1, test item 1, test item 2, test item 2, and test item 3, test item 3. There you go. Now we can just go ahead and test this. Oops, I forgot one thing. We need to also drag this in here. So we take our initialize base inventory items, just like this. And now we have it here. And when we click play and we go into our inventory, we now see a few inventory items, just like this. And if we, for example, would go ahead and get back into that data table, so right here, and data table server details, no, client details, and we add some description, item 1 description, item 2 description, and item 3 description, just to have some very basic descriptions so we can actually see how it looks. And we click play and we go in our inventory, we can see we have item 1, item 2, item 3. One thing I want to really quickly do is, because I like keeping my UI a bit cleaner, let's go into our item row. And in here, what I want to do is I want to add a vertical box and add a slight bit of a spacer, which should ensure at least a little bit of padding on the top and bottom without doing some arbitrary padding. So let's set this to fill and set this to 0.05. So we now have a little bit of space on the top and the bottom. We can also see this if we now click play. We now see the items are a bit more spaced from each other. All right, let's just continue from here. All we done until now is good and all, but why don't we actually make an item so we can pick that up? So what I want to do here is, first of all, save everything we done and close everything for now, so we don't have way too much open, and make sure to save everything all. And then let's make a new folder, which is in, caps is on, in-world item. In-world item, we're gonna make a new actor, which is gonna be a underscore pickup able item. Now we need to do one thing, and it is important for the server and the client. So we do this in the server details, and what we're gonna add here is we're gonna add a static mesh. Why do we add a static mesh on the server and the client? We need to be able to pull that hitbox for the server, so we need to know how we can actually hit an item. So this is why I'm adding a static mesh. I don't really have anything prepared yet, so I'm just going to use a cube for all of them, but this will be an easy way to go ahead and say, I have a static mesh, I just parse it in there and it will work. All right, and this is incoming new mesh. Item mesh. What am I saying? Item mesh. Just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. All right. Then in our inward item, what I want this to be is I want this to be replicates, and I want this to have a string, which is gonna be a item identifier. All right. In here, I'm just gonna delete them. Actually, we need a begin play one, damn it. So begin play, get the item identifier, which is expose and spawn. So we can just modify this in world, and we get this, and we get data table row. And the data table we want to get this from is server details. And what we want to do is we want to then take this and promote this to a variable, which is then what we should call it. This should be replicated, and this is preview details. Actually, item details. There you go. What we want to do is we want this to also only run on authority. So this doesn't run on clients, it just runs on servers. And when we set this, we want to set this on a rep notify, and we want to then take all these details we got and then set them for the client. What you would do probably if you have a static mesh and you have your items properly sized. In my case, I'm just going to use a basic cube, but in your case, you can use whatever mesh you want. You just need to make sure it's properly sized, or you add another variable in, for example, you add another variable in here, which will be, for example, a vector, which will be scale. But one thing I recommend, scale your items properly so you don't have to do this kind of stuff. So if you, for example, have a bandage, make sure you take real world measurements and apply it to the mesh so it's the exact size, so you don't need to do like little micromanagement stuff later down the line. I'm going to remove this again because I'm not going to do this. If I'm going to later add meshes, I'm going to make sure I measure my stuff right. And yeah, so then what you could do if you wouldn't be me, you could take this mesh and you can set static mesh. Make sure if you do this, you have a mesh already set up with collisions. There's a lot of tutorials out there on how to set up collisions, and it's very quickly, especially with cubic type items. I'm not gonna go over this now. I might go over this when I actually get into adding some meshes in here, but for now I'm gonna keep it like this. Just remember, if you want to use this with your own meshes, make sure you connect this line here, and it will apply the mesh for all clients. All right, and for the server. But what we care about for now, I'm still gonna do something on rep notify. Don't worry about this. I still want a way to see what item we have on the floor. So what I'm gonna really quickly do is I'm gonna jump into my assets folder, jump into my materials folder, and make a new material folder, which is gonna be item materials. In this item materials folder, I make 3 materials. I'm gonna call this M for the prefix for material, test item 1. In this, I want to create a vector3 node, which I went over in earlier tutorials, but I like to say it again. I'm holding down 3 and pressing left click. Then I'm holding down 1 and pressing left click. This will be our roughness. So let me take this into base color and this into roughness, set this to a 1 and set this to a red color. Orange color works. So this is test item 1. And what we can just do is promote this here to a parameter, and this is going to be our color parameter. And we can now apply this and just create material instance, and we're going to call this test item 2. So in here we can just apply this to like a green. Then we can create another parameter, and a parameter by the instance, and test item 3, and we can just make this blue. So we have some clear visual identification what is what. So let me save this, and let's go back into the blueprint we just made, the in-world item blueprint. So we want to switch on item category. Actually, let's do a select. It will make things a bit easier. Then we take our static mesh and we want to set material. You don't have to do that if you're actually working with proper items that already have proper meshes. If you're using items, always make sure you set your material in the, like if you have a mesh, I don't think I have a mesh in here, but well, I can actually show this on here. So if you have a mesh, make sure, where is it? Not in here. Oh, in the mesh here. You always set the materials. This will look a little bit different with static meshes, but always make sure if you have something, you need to set the materials in here. Otherwise, if you load them via a data table and you didn't do that, you would not have a texture on them unless you have set them in the mesh itself in the engine. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the material. And if it's a firearm, I'm going to set this to 1, 2, and 3. And let's make a new one for magazine. So let's go on materials and let's duplicate this and test item 4. And magazine is going to just be white. All right. So this is test item 4. Test item 4. There you go. And now we can just drag this into the scene. So let's get this. Actually, I think I have the wrong map open. Let's open this one. And let's drag this in-world item into the scene. And before I continue, I forgot something. I need to add a simple cube for this. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's undo this. And let's show engine content. And just look for cube. And let's scale this to like 0.05. Like I said again, if you have custom items, make sure you just keep this at scale 1 and just scale the custom item properly. All right. So if you would click play, we wouldn't get anything. Oops, it is over here. And just making sure that it spawns on all players. So if we, well, it's not important now, but I will go into that in a second. What we want to do now is we want to go into our data table, which I can just easily do when I go in this blueprint. Click on this glass thingy, and then I can just copy this, go in here, paste this in here, and if I click play, it should have the orange color on both players. So this already indicates that it loaded the item properly for this player. And now let's just switch, like let's make a few more of those. So that's 2, 3, 4, and test item 3, test item 2. So we can just make sure this logic already works. So yeah, we can see we have blue, we have green, and we have orange on all players we have here. So this is already working. So the items are getting created and they're getting created for all players. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take our inworld item and we want to add a property first, and which we're gonna call is spawned. So if this is spawn, is dropped better, is dropped. So if it's, first of all, replicated, if it's dropped, we wanna not do this. So if it's dropped, if it's not dropped, so if it's not dropped, we wanna just do this, but if it's dropped, then we wanna follow a different path down here, which I'm gonna go over in a second. But first of all, I want a custom event in here, and this is gonna be called pickup item. This is gonna be a run on server event, and yeah. So I'm gonna get into my project settings. Oop, where did they just open? There we go. And in here, I want to go into collision and make a new trace channel. And this is gonna default be ignore. This is gonna be item. All right, it's gonna be item. And then what I'm gonna do in pickup item, I wanna give this a, nah, I think it's fine, it's fine. Where did I just do this? Oh yeah. So what I wanna do now is I wanna go into pickup item, go into the mesh, go into our collision preset, apply a custom one, and on item, I want to block. So now I want to go to my player, so blueprint, then I want to go in here, and what I want to do is I want to add a arrow component, which is attached to my mesh, and from that mesh, I want to attach it to a hand socket. No, I want to attach it just to the camera because it will make things easier. So let's just attach this to a camera, set a 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And if I turn the camera now, it should turn this one, yeah, okay. Right, so I'm gonna take this, move it a bit forward, and I'm gonna use that to do my trace. So on event graph, I want to make a custom event, interact with item. If we hit a crate, we want to do some specific stuff. If we had a normal item, we want to do some specific stuff. So this is going to be a run on server event. And for this, I want to really quickly go back in my project settings, add an input. This input is going to be F, which is gonna, yes, this is gonna be here, F, and this is gonna be interact with item. So I'm gonna call interact with item. Oops. Did I compile this? Yeah, I should have. Gonna just copy paste this in here. Nope. It's the bottom one. I shouldn't have named in the cell the same. So what I'm gonna do really quickly is I'm gonna prefix this with an RS because it's a run on server event. And then I'm gonna call ROS interact with item. And then I do this. And one thing I just realized is if we just do a line trace, it could be that we hit a wall. So we want to do first of all, we want to forward the arrow location and arrow rotation, or we want to get world location, get world rotation and get forward vector. What get forward vector does, it gets, like, we're getting the rotation and we're getting the forward vector. So if I rotate this item here, the forward vector would be now this direction, because the rotation is pointing in this direction. If we do it the other way, this would be the forward vector. So it's pretty much just the forward location. We already use this down here to, when we rotate our character, to always be pointing forward and right, depending on our move direction stuff. Okay, so what I want to add here is two vectors. So this is location and direction. Actually, I'm not gonna do the thing I just said a second ago, because this would just take otherwise way too long. I'm probably gonna cover this in the future when we go over a bit of quality of life improvements. But for now, we're gonna just do it like this. We have our location and we have our direction. What we wanna do now is we wanna do a line trace by channel, right? Yes. And our channel is going to be item. Our start location is just location we provided. And our direction will be our location plus vector plus vector. And what we want to just simply do is get our direction, which is our looking at direction, and multiply this by int. And in our case, let's just do like 500. And if you don't like the distance, you can justify it for your own project, but this is what I'm gonna go with for now. And what I'm gonna do for debug purposes is I'm gonna really quickly do this also on a client, just so we can see where the trace would be going. Just like this. And if we click play, and we just do a trace. Oops. Am I doing something wrong? Something is not working. Let me check if I'm actually, oh. For duration, let's just do this. That was my mistake. So if we click play now, we can see, there you go, we're hitting it. There you go, that works. So just like this, we can remove it now because we know it works. And if we hit an item, you want to return true. And actually, if we hit an item, we do another trace if we can actually hit the item. So what we do is we just do this. And we're gonna just set this to visibility. And let's do the same thing we did over here, because it's kind of important that people are not able to pick up items through walls. So let's cover this right here before we just go a bit lazy and not deal with this right away. So we're gonna do, that's not what I want to do. I want to recombine the struct again, and I want to break this, and I want to break this. If hit actor is the same as this hit actor, then we are allowed to proceed, because then we hit the item we should be allowed to hit. And later when we have a weapon, we need to make sure we add this weapon to actors to ignore. But for now, we just do ignore self because we don't have any other actors that could cause any issues. All right. And then on this branch, when it's true, we want to take this actor, cast to our AM. First of all, I have an idea. What I'm gonna really quickly do is I'm gonna give this component tags, not component tags, but actor tags. So let's get into this actor and let's look into where tags are. Tags, let's just search for it. And I give this actor the tag of in-world item. This just makes things a bit easier instead of having to try to cast this first, and if it fails, do this. Now, if hit actor get tags, and if we find the tag in world item and it does not equal to 0, so what we do is we check if that tag in world item exists inside our actor here, and if it does, and if it does not equal to 0, then we go true and we pick up item. Pick up item, and then pick up item. What we now need in pickup item is we need the actor we want to add it to. So in our case, character main and reference wants actor to pick up. Okay, and we just reference ourselves because we want to pick this up, nobody else does. Right. So let's go over really quickly again to explain what we just did. So the first thing is we call input interact with item. We get our arrow, we get our word location. If you want to do some cheat prevention, you can also add some more logic here to check the actor location down here on the server and the location of this arrow component, and if they're a specific distance away from each other, you could call this a fake call and just decline the call for the trace. And if it's not too far away, you can just say, oh yeah, you can do it. That would be a very simple way to just prevent some cheating, because it's not the best way to always replicate everything. A general saying is do not trust the client, but sometimes you kind of need to trust the client, otherwise it's gonna get very expensive for the server. All right, so down here is we have our location and our direction. We do the first trace to check if we hit an item. If we do hit an item, we do our second trace and check if the visible item is a item, like if we hit the same. If not, there's something in between us and the item, so we disallow the interaction with it. If it is the same, we allow interaction with it, and then we check if it's an in-world item, because we later also deal with crates, which is also still part of this video. So if it finds in-world item, we want to and we want to attempt a pickup. Later I would go over, not in this part, but how to limit inventory pickups. I think that will be mainly a topic when we actually go over how to make sub inventories and make like vests, make backpacks, and make just generally some way to store some items on the player and just break things up. All right. Now we want to add a function here, which we're gonna call add item to inventory. And the inventory in question will be this inventory. So what we want to do is we can just do this and do this. And then we take both of those, and the details we want to add is we're just gonna call item details, and then we just set this struct again to itself, so it updates our data table. All right, so back here, we go into pickup item, then we want to call add item to inventory. The item in question is this one. And then what we do after that is we want to destroy the item. Destroy actor. For now, we just do a destroy actor, whatever happens. But later we could add a return value to this so we can check if the player was able to pick it up. And if he wasn't, we do not destroy it, because that would be stupid. Because if a player can't pick up an item and he still picks it up, it's kind of bad. But for now this will work. So if we go into play, take this item, and oops, I should actually still keep this trace going, so I'm able to see if I made any, oh yeah, this was a mistake first of all. So let's try it again. Give me 1 second. So I ran into a few bugs, and let me figure out how I solved them, because it's also kind of an important part about game development. So let me get back into my widget here. So we were last left off here. So I had an issue with it not getting the tag. That was the first one. So what I did is I got the tags. I got the first index of the tags, which if we pick up an actor, go in here and search for tags again. I don't know where it is actually. So this is a zeroth index, and I'm not gonna add more indexes to that. So that's the only index we're gonna have, and this is an inward item. So that's what I'm checking for. If this is equal to inward index, I let it go through. All right, that was the first fix. Then add item to inventory. Don't need this anymore, and don't need this anymore. I forgot to call ROC update player inventory. Then I was running into the issue that if I pick up a item, it just decided to not show. How I fixed this is also I added the way of setting it to itself. That is only needed if we actually use a rep notify. So let's remove that also here, making sure we don't do stuff we shouldn't be doing. And the last thing was I somehow ran into issues when I'm updating my inventory. So what I decided to do is whenever I open the inventory, I do a mandatory inventory update. So if it before ran into a weird issue, it now force updates the inventory, clears it, and draws it again. The other logic we have in here, if we go back into the player, like the pickup item logic, is more something that should only be active if the player is inside the inventory, and if he is inside the inventory, then we want to do it. So what we can really quickly do is we can make a custom event update is in inventory. So we're gonna call this a run on server, and we're gonna set is in inventory this way. Why are we doing this? Because we want to know if we are in inventory. So update is in inventory. Up here we want to set this to true. Down here we want to set this to false, and we're gonna use this to in our add item to inventory. If we is in if we are in inventory, we definitely want to update the client. If we're not, it's not that important. So because if we would actively work with widget stuff in the background, it can kind of get expensive. So we only do it when the player needs it. And one thing I also did here, I made this reliable, because if we want to run this, we want to run this. All right. So if I go ahead and click play now, also one thing I changed this to a run dedicated server instead of run client based like server. So if I pick those two items up, I see them in my inventory. I also removed the base function we had before that on default added 4 items to your inventory. I'm also gonna really quickly go over and delete it completely with you. So there we go. Initialize base inventory items, you're also gone, because we don't need it. We now have a way to actively pick up items, and just making sure that it works now, I'm gonna click play again and pick up 2 items as this guy, and pick these 2 items up as this guy. And if I look in my inventory, I have 2 and 3, and if I look in my inventory, I have 1 and 3. I had 2 3s, 1 1, and 1 2. So we now see this works. This is great. This is very good, because now we can move on to more complicated stuff. So next thing we want to do is we're gonna just really quickly power through this. And so let me get into my UI and not player HUD. Widget blueprint inventory. Not inventory, but in inventory widget blueprint item row. If we click on this and press D, we want to interact. So get input key down. Okay, we need to get player controller is input key down, and the input key in our case is just the D button. We can later do something more in depth than this and actually make a dedicated button for this, but for now I'm gonna use D, and if it's down, we also want to give this a owner. I just realized because that's what I kind of forgot. So the owner in this case is widget blueprint inventory, and we're just gonna call this widget owner. So in here we want to go ahead, and when we populate that, we can actually make this, whoops, that's not what I want to do. We can make this expose and spawn editable. And if we go back in our widget inventory and update player inventory and refresh this widget, oops, refresh, we can just get a reference to self. And this will give us the option so we can run code from in here. Do we have a reference to our owner in here? We do not. So what we also want to do in here is we want to get a reference to our HUD. So player HUD. Actually, we don't really need that. We're going to actually not even worry about this now. We're gonna cut the middleman, and we get player controller get controlled pawn, and then we wanna cast to char main, and then we want to call a function which will be something like attempt inventory drop. So where is it? Blueprints, there we go, character. So let's add a custom event prepare item drop, which is a client event, so we do not change anything else. So what we want to do is we want to prepare item drop, and the thing is now we need to provide this with information. So what information we want to provide this with is just a simple string, which is identifier, and the other thing is ID. All right. So now that we have both of these, we can just give them the slot ID and the item identifier. Now that we have this, we go here, we make a custom event, which is going to be a ROS attempt item drop, which we're just going to do a ROS. All right. And in here, we want to check, well, we want to get those two variables in here, which one is a string, which is identifier, and the other one is the ID. So we want to ROS attempt item drop, and we need to refresh this. For this, we need to do this, refresh nodes, identifier, ID. And then we go down here, and we have an identifier and we have an ID. What we want to do now is get our player inventory, and we want to get, this is the first line. Well, can we check last index if this is returns true if A is greater than B? Yeah. So we first check if we're trying to attempt to go over our last index, because we want to be able to catch errors while they occur. So if it's higher than what it should be, we do not want to continue this action, and we want to force update the player's inventory. So how we're gonna do this is we're just gonna take this little, well, we can't do it this way because we're not on server, but we can RSA update player inventory, just like this, and we're gonna call this, because when we run into this kind of issue, we see, oh, the player needs to have an issue, let's force update his inventory and figure out if it fixed the issue. Okay, so if this is our first fair condition, so if A is greater, so last index is higher, greater or equal, I need this, greater or equal, because if it's equal, then it's just the last index, otherwise we can run into issues. So, and if that's the case, we want to grab this index, and the next thing we want to do is we want to check if the identifier is right. Because if this identifier is right, maybe the inventory changed, but the client didn't get an update, then we want to do the same thing we just did. And we want to just go back in here and do a force inventory update. And the last thing now is we want to actually drop it. And for this, I just made something a bit special here. So if we have an inward item and we want to call is dropped, if it's dropped, we want to not do anything. Then we want a custom event in here, initialize dropped item details. So this is going to be a RS, run on server. And what we want to do in here is we want to just provide an item details, and we want to provide a unique item identifier. So details, and we want to provide a item identifier, which is just a string, and it's a item identifier. So let's take this here, and what we're gonna do is we want to set this, and then align this here, just to make it look better. Why can't you align? Please align. Okay, let's just keep it that way. Then we want to set this variable here. Oh, I just did item details, not server details. And on wrap notify, it should just call this. All right. Then we want to do this expose and spawn instance edible. Not eatable. It's not eatable. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. Then we update here. And if it's not true, we want to create, first of all, we want to remove that index. So we want to remove index. So let's actually turn this into a function. This is getting kind of messy. So let's just turn this into a function. Oh, how did I just make the main node disappear? This is the first for me. So let's turn this into a function, and we're gonna call this function f attempt. Ooh, that's not good. I'm back in my come on, let me rename you. Attempt item drop. All right. And what we can do now is we can call this, for example, item ID and item identifier. And a cool thing we can actually do, which I only recently found out, I can actually item identifier and get those variables just like you could do in C++. So this is great because then we don't need to drag those lines where they don't need to go. And I can just pull item ID just like this and plug it into here, remove those lines so it's a bit cleaner, and just do this here, just like this. And then we have this, which we kind of need to keep it that way. But now we can just get the item ID and remove this index. But before we remove that index, we need to get this index. So we need to get, and we need to promote this to a variable right here. This is gonna be called something like, oh, this needs to be a local variable, not a global variable. I apologize for that. Local variable, which is gonna be item reference. Item reference. So we want to keep a reference of the item when we remove the index. I think this should be the last thing in general. This should be after spawning the item. No. If this fails, we can just add it back. And what we want to do is we want to spawn actor. And the actor in case will be pickupable item. We want to set this to dropped. And then we want to call update. First of all, I need to take things a bit calmer. Yeah, spawn transform. That's a transform. That's the important thing. So line trace by channel. I'm not gonna do any physics stuff because that's gonna take even longer. And hit location. There we go. So what we're gonna start tracing, we wanna start tracing from get actor location plus vector. We're just gonna add 100 upwards, and then we're gonna just trace down. So get actor location minus vector minus 500, just like this. And visibility is fine, and then we spawn it right there, and then we call update. No, I didn't call it update. Initialize dropped item. Initialize dropped item. Then we're just gonna get the item identifier right here, just like this, and we're gonna get the item reference just like this. So now we can actually attempt to drop an item. And after this, we need to surely do this again, because we want to update the player's inventory if he dropped items. Otherwise, he's gonna attempt to drop another item. And yeah. All right. Remove index. Yes, I think that's it. Did I set up everything in here? Prepare drop item. RS attempt drop item. Let's try it. But before I do this, I want to make sure I add a print string in here that notifies me trying to drop item. Also, over here, make sure to ignore self. So if I am in my inventory, which is accessible with D, press Shift F1, nothing happens. Oh, it actually worked. All right. Oh, let me figure out what is happening there. So let's press G. Let's change some things on this. And actually, right here, remove all collisions, except visibility. Because we only need two traces, which is visibility and the other one. So we can just keep it at visibility. So we shouldn't now run into issues if we drop this item. There you go. Dropped it right here. If it dropped it, yeah, it also dropped it for this player, so you can now pick it up. Shift D. There you go. I'm still getting moved. Why am I getting moved? Weird. It's gonna be an issue for another day. Probably gonna make a follow-up to this, fixing this. I just realized this wasn't a bug, that was just me being me, because I realized I bound this to the D key. So let me just quickly rebind this to something like X so we don't move around while we're in inventory. So if I pick this up, go my inventory, Shift D, press X, sometimes it needs twice click. Yeah, it works. And I was wondering why are we getting shoved around by this weird little item? But no, it's not a bug. It's you can call it a feature. All right, so we dropped an item and it's dropping. So we can now pick it up as this player. Let's just attempt, if it works all fine, picking up all the items. Yeah, we have all the items in here. And we can now go over Shift 1. There you go. We dropped all items and they're all top of each other. So we can go ahead with this player and pick up all of 4 and it works. So let's do the last part of this tutorial, doing crates. This will be fun. All right. Now let's go in the final push. So let's make a actor, which we're gonna call crate. So this crate actor, what we want in there is pretty much an array of server details. So add a variable, get server details. Also, one thing I forgot to show, I am really sorry for this. I changed this from authority to a is server. I really hope nobody had issues with it and I forgot to tell you guys about it. But what I did is I added is server and added a branch. Just checking if it's the server. Then this is all items, crate items. So yeah, so in here we want to, actually I need to begin play. We want to actually provide a string of items, which I'm gonna pretty much call preset up items, and we want to make a new variable in here, which is a main reference, which is interacting players, because we need to, for all interacting players, we need to keep them up to date what is in a crate and what isn't. All right, so we now have all these. So I want this to be instance editable. I don't need to be this to be replicated because clients do not need to know about who is interacting. If you want to make it so clients actually see who is in a crate, you can gladly let them interact with it. You can just make this replicated, and then we can, for example, forward the names. Like we can make a little list of names in here, and when a player leaves, you could show that, or when a player joins, you can show that now more players are in this crate. That's very great. So we want to check is server, and we want to put that into a branch. All right, if we are server, we want to take those presets and we want to loop through them, and we want to, based on that, add some more items. So this doesn't need to be replicated because it's literally server only. Then we can just pull the logic we have in here. There we go. Instead of using that one identifier, we have multiple, and instead of item details, we have crate items where we can just add this onto. Also very important, we need to make crate details not exposed, but replicated. I think, do we need to? Yeah, I guess, yes. All right. No, we don't need to make this replicated because we can just pull from here. Okay, sorry about that. So we want to make a function drop item in crate and take item from container. Also, let me change this to container. From container. There you go. drop item in container. So what we want to do is pretty much just do a add and just add this in here. Nothing special. This is literally new item. Oh, well, it was already called new item. But we do not care about anything else. We do not need to check if, oh, we can drop them. That logic will come in the later part because that would blow just my time budget for today. So when we add this, the crate items, when we add this to the crate items, we want to get all interacting players and oops, close other tabs and close other tabs. Do I already have a custom event for that? What happened here? Oh, okay, that was weird. No, I don't think so. So let's make a custom event, which is ROC update crate inventory. So this is gonna be on run on only client. And then what we want to do is we want to take all this, and I think there's a update, how do I call it? Let's go into our Widget Blueprint inventory. I have update, it's called interact with inventory, so let's call it that also. Oops, that's the wrong one. Interact with inventory, just like this. And what we want to do later is add another function that will remove the last inventory. So we're going to call this remove last inventory, and we're going to take this, pull this here, and just call this. And this is gonna get called if we're getting out of, wait, so first of all, we want to make another variable in here, which is a crate reference, a actor reference, interacted crate. So this way we can later call and remove. And the thing I want to do with the crate, I want to also give this a actor reference, a tag, and this is going to be a container, just like this. And I also should rename this to a_container for actor_container. All right. So I take this container now, go back into my character main, and it's a bit messy in here. We should do some cleanup episode or something like that, something very quickly explaining how we can clean up this very easily. All right, and we check if it's container, and if it's container, we want to cast to container. And after we cast container, we want to promote this to interact with container, and then we want to call open inventory. So we want a custom event in here, custom event, open inventory, which is a run on server. And run on only client, not on server. Run on only client. Run on only client. It's reliable because we always want this to happen. And what we instantly do is we get the widget switcher. So you know what? We're gonna do that a bit different. We're gonna just hook this up here. Then we wanna pretty much. One thing we want to do is get widget switcher main. Do I have a function for that? Let me just really quickly show. Look, not show. yeah, it's just called show inventory. Then we call show inventory. Show inventory. Wait. No, that's not show inventory. I apologize about this. Yes, it is showing. Oh wait, I already have it. Never mind, this is instantly opening the inventory because I forgot I don't have like an intermediate inventory. I just have an instant inventory. And so yeah, well, I can just hook this up to it then. So now I want to get all the housekeeping stuff out of the way before we get into the actual stuff. So show inventory, yes. And if it closes, you want to remove last inventory. That just removes the sub inventory every time we reload the inventory. And then when we remove last inventory, you want a custom function in here, which pretty much custom event as remove crate reference. So we want to call this on run on server. So as remove crate reference. So in here, interacted crate, and where is it? Container. It's not a variable. I apologize for that. And we want add player, and we want remove player, and we want to add a character main, and we want to find item, and we want to remove index if that doesn't equal to -1. If it does not equal to -1, you want to remove this index. And so we're gonna use this for bug hunting, for bug prevention purposes. So we're gonna take this, go to add player. If the player is already in here, we want to remove him. So we're gonna add a reference, and we're gonna call this player. And if he's already in there, we remove him, and then we add him again. Well, if he's already in there, we don't do anything with it. We keep him there. Otherwise, we add him. And then what we want to call from here is, how did I call it? Character main. I'll say update crate inventory. So I'll see update crate inventory, just like this. Whatever happens, we want to update this. So crate items, just put them in here, and just like this. And every time we drop item into container, we want to loop through this, and we want to update every player. So let me just copy paste this from here, just like this, and just like this. And what we're gonna do is copy paste this into take item from container, where we need to add a bit more logic in a second, but for now this is not that important. Okay, so we have now the ability to drop items into container. So let's go into our inventory, actually item, and if we just click on the item, we want to swap from also, let me add a modifier, add a detail, which is in crate, which should be a exposed variable. And now let's go back into our inventory. I really am sorry for this being so long, but it's very important that we do this right the first time, so we don't have to constantly come back to this and redo stuff all the time. So let's refresh this. Update player inventory. Nope. Interact with inventory is the one we want. Refresh nodes. Yes. And I don't think we need widget owner anymore because we found a better workaround. So, item row, there we are. So let's get rid of widget owner. And if we're not pressing the X key while we do this, we wanna still cast our main character. But in the main character, what we wanna do is we wanna pretty much tell it to remove the item from here, but add it to the crate. And we want another function in here, custom event, drop item in crate, move item player crate. Oh, this would never work in C++. So let's just hook those up. It's just a very simple name to call it. Copy paste this and pretty much let's just add a underscore instead. I don't like those arrows. Okay, let's add a underscore in here. Oops, let's add a underscore and do a prefix ROS. So ROS underscore, and we want to run this on the server. So then we want to call ROS move item from player crate. There we go. And here it goes in here, and then we can deal with what we want to do with it. So we need a third property in here, and we want to check is in crate. Let's copy paste this property, add another bool, and this is in crate. There you go. Let's go back to item row and move item player crate. So we need identifier, slot ID, and is in crate. There you go. Then we do this, and then we wanna check if it's in crate. If it is, we want to, give me 1 second. Yeah, if it's in crate, we want to oh, what just broke? Yeah, we want to just refresh this node. And this right here. Refresh nodes already. And let's get into container and add player take item from container. And so what we want to do is we're gonna get a integer, and we want to get a we want to get a player reference, and what we want to also get is a string. So we have a index and we have a identifier. Okay. So first we want to check. Actually, we pretty much already set it up once. I don't think we need to go back into player HUD. I don't think we need to go back into inventory, and I don't think we need to go back into item row, so we can close all of those. So what we've done here, we can pretty much copy paste. So I just need to find it. So we want this at least. Awesome, let's get rid of this. So we want this at least, and we want this branch. So let's get this in here. And we want to take this branch and we want to just take index. So this is, we're checking here just if this is the if this is higher than the last index. If it is, we want to take that player and specifically update that player only with this inventory details. All right, just like this. Okay, then what we want to get is we want to get this index, get, and we want to check if this index, then we want to split this node here. If the identifier is equal to identifier is equal to item identifier. So if this is equal to this, and this is true, otherwise we want to do this again. So what we want to do is now pretty much we want to remove the index. So what I'm gonna get is I want to take this, I want to get, then I want to promote this to a variable, which is how do you call this? That's also a global variable, which we don't want. So let's promote this to a local variable, which we're gonna call saved details. And then we want to remove index here, remove index, just like this. And then we wanna call this. And then we wanna pretty much get our player. So let's get player. And then we want to call add item. And the item in question is our save details. Add item to inventory. Yeah, it updates this function. This is great. Okay. So we don't have to worry about this. But after this happened, we want to update on everybody that somebody just took something out of the container. And now we need to, was it the take item from container? Yes. Drop item into container is the next thing. So what we pretty much gonna do is, this is very easy because we pretty much set up everything for this already. So let's go into our event graph and copy paste attempt drop, attempt to move item to container. Okay, so if we are interacting with a container, only then we want to go into here. All right, so attempt to move item into container. If this is false, yes. So let's take the ID and the item identifier. And the other one is drop item in container. Wait, that's, nope, that's another one. Remove item. Did I call it? Oh, I need to look at it again. Take item from container. Take item from container. There you go. It's like this. Get a self-reference. Okay, and I attempt to move item to container. So this is player inventory. Yes, because we want to move from player to that, yeah. But then we don't want to run this logic. We don't, because what we want to do is we want to get, first of all, we need to check if interacting crate is still valid. So before we do any kind of critical logic, we want to check is valid. Because if it's not valid, we're going to run into issues and we could get a reference error because our reference got destroyed. So if it's valid, we want to add item, how did I call it? Drop items into container. Drop item in container. And then I get the item reference and just plug this in here. And then I call this. All right. So now this is done. We can remove crate reference. Interacting crate if this is valid, only if it's valid. I want to set, I want to call remove player. And the player in question will be our self. And then I want to interacting crate set to nothing. And up here, I want to set is interacting with container. And down here, I also want to set is interacting with container, but this time to false and up here to true. I think I've done everything we need. If not, I'm going to cut really quickly and fix the bugs we find. But we also need to add a container into the scene and add a mesh to it. So static mesh, let's just add a cube for simplicity. So let's just scale this down, just make a simple item. And in our collision presets, I want to add a custom one. Ignore everything but item and visibility. All right. So now we can just drop a container into the world and add a few items to that, because otherwise this is gonna take a while. So let's take some item 2 and one item 1. Let's hope we set up everything right. Before I continue, inside the RS interact with, I forgot a few small things. I want to call open inventory. So open inventory. There we go. And I also need to call add player. So add player, just like this, and the reference to it will be self. Then we need to click into add player. Yes, and we want to check remove player. Yes. So let's test this out. So now we see our free items, but nothing happens if we click on them. All right, let's figure out why this is not happening. So one thing I also forget, which is, let's go over here. We need to not set this on open inventory, which I had set before. We need to set this on server, and just making sure that here we're setting this to false. We always want to set this to false. And in container, if we take item from container, yes, but one thing I'm forgetting, I need to update the player inventory. Player, I changed again to Visual Blueprint inventory. No, wait, it's in character main. How do we update the inventory again? It's a simple function, which is just called, where is it? I mean, it's in pickup item. It is an add item to inventory. RC update player inventory. Okay, so let's take this from container and just call RC update player inventory, just like this. And also when we drop item into container, we want to, are we already calling this? So character main, if we're, if we, not in here, if we drop item, attempt to move item into container, update player inventory, yes, we're already doing that. So we don't have to worry about it there. So if we click play and we interact with player A and player B, let's say player B takes an item. It doesn't update our inventory, but we can fix that. So if we press G, it updates it. So if I press G, we see we have those items now in our inventory, but if we click there and we interact back with it, it's not in our inventory again. So it's not updating our inventory, which should be an easy fix. So drop item into container, take item from container. So update play inventory. Now the question is, so take item from container. Actually, when we do update crate inventory, we can also do update player inventory. I think that would be a bit easier. Update player inventory. Player inventory. RC update player inventory. All right, then let's try this again. Interact with the crate. Take this item. Why do you not work? All right, I fixed it. Okay, so one thing I had it on left shift because I was a bit weird in the head apparently. So what I did is update is in inventory. I moved them down here. And now I hooked this up just to here. And now if we click play, this should work 100%. So let's just hope it works. So if we click here and we take item, we see that it got out of there. And if we take item here, it got removed from this player. If we take item here, it got removed from this player. If that player adds an item again, it gets added. And if we get out of this inventory and pick up some more items, it should show up in our inventory. There we go. And now if we just go ahead and add them all in here, the other player should see them and we can take them out. And that was it with the inventory part. I apologize for all the hiccups I had during this. It was not planned. It was... also, I did this part very differently. I approached it as I would approach my normal stuff normally. So meaning, I didn't plan this tutorial out. Not like the first two, I didn't plan this out. I completely made this on the fly. I added all logic on the fly. I had a bit of planning in before, and I thought about it while cycling today. So I just tried to get the rough shape on. And I know it's different. People liked it back when I did my Rainbow Six series, which is now not anymore on YouTube. So you need to give me feedback if you like this kind of tutorial. If it's a bit more in depth. It's actually talking about my thought process, and it's going a bit more in depth in general. If you don't like that, let me know, and I go back to the normal type of tutorials, which are shorter, because that is, I think, over 2 hours now. But with this said, I really, really hope you can take something away from this. And if you generally have any issues, any questions, make sure to just get into the Discord, which should be linked below, and just shoot me a message. I should normally be available it should be always normally available to answer your questions. We also now got our first Patreon, which I'm very happy about. So people actually enjoy the tutorial. If you'd like to also support the project, please make sure to, if you can, support the project on Patreon. You will also get some perks, which I'm still working on. I finished today the Discord stuff, so Discord roles are going. So yeah, But with that said, I hope you have a very, very amazing day. And I really, really hope you can take something away from here to put in your own projects, or maybe just take along the way for the future. With that said, I hope you have a really, really good day, and goodbye. My brain